Good evening, everyone. We're just going to take a quick second and let people get in and get settled. It is so nice having all of you with us this evening. Again, we're letting people get on and get settled. I do want to say good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Yampa Valley State of the River. My name is Alicia Frederick. I am the Director of Information and Outreach with the Colorado River District. Popping up on the screen with me also this evening is Michelle Moyer with the Community Agricultural Alliance. It's great to have you here with us tonight, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's our pleasure to help promote this event. We have for several years, and I think it's a really important one in our community. I just really want to encourage everyone who's logging in to learn more about water, even beyond what we're doing tonight, and potentially go to the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable website. It's just at yampawhitegreen.com. There's a great amount of information and resources there about water-related issues in our basin, and a great way to connect with the community. So thanks so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to hear from all of our great speakers.
Thanks. Again, it is really great to be able to partner with you guys on this event. It's always a good one to have you at. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping details with you. If you have any questions today, we ask that you type them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We will answer most questions at the end of the event, except for any questions that we have for Dr. Bollinger. Unfortunately, Dr. Bollinger will not be able to stay on with us through the whole event, so we'll take questions for her after her presentation. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can this evening, but if we aren't able to get to your questions, we will provide email addresses for all of the speakers at the end of the event in the chat box so you can directly communicate with the presenter to get your questions answered. I hope that many of you are aware of the Colorado River District and the work that we do, but for those of you that may not know about us, we're an organization that's been around now for more than 80 years. We were formed in 1937 to protect the water interests of Western Colorado. We represent 15 different counties here on the West Slope, which covers about 1/3 of the state's land mass. We're an organization that has a small but dedicated staff that's passionate about advocating for West Slope water. Our staff consists of a technical team that works to find solutions to challenges and a collaborative effort through the district throughout the district and throughout our 7 basin states. We have a legal team that diligently fights to keep West Slope water here on the West Slope. We have a policy team that maintains a regular presence at the Capitol. And then we also have started a new focus on funding multi-purpose water projects. That's something that we're really excited about because it's something we were able to do with the support of our voters and the passing of 7A. Here to talk to you just a little bit more about the Partnership Project Funding Program, I'd like to introduce to you Amy Moyer. Amy serves as the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at the Colorado River District. She oversees the district's new funding program following a passage of ballots, question 7A, in addition to facilitating other partnerships across the district. She's only been with the River District for a few months. She started in March of this year, but she previously worked as the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, at the Colorado Department of Natural Resources as the Assistant Director for Water, where she developed and implemented water policy for the state of Colorado. It's good to have you with us, Amy. Are you?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Good evening, everyone. My name again is Amy Moyer. I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships with the Colorado River District, and I'm looking forward to taking a few moments of tonight's presentation to talk about our community funding partnership. And so for those of you that have been following our funding program closely, you'll notice a new name for the program and some new branding and a logo here on my slide. And so the community funding partnership aligns with our vision and true north for the program to secure the future for West Slope water and ultimately to support our communities and help them adapt and thrive into the future. But to start out with some of our program history, many of you know that this program started at the ballot box with the passage of ballot question 7A. And we've said it many times and we'll continue to say thank you to Colorado's voters, the voters in our district, for supporting ballot question 7A so substantially, supporting water and particularly the West Slope. But again, as I mentioned, the goal of our funding program is to advance the Colorado River District's mission and strategic plan to secure and protect water on the West Slope and to support our communities as they advance and thrive into the future. With the passage of ballot question 7A, the River District has about $4.2 million annually to dedicate to high impact water projects across our district. We've currently funded 8 projects, as you can see on the project map. The project map is also available on our Colorado River District website, in addition to brief descriptions of each project that we funded. The 8 projects include a variety of project types, from dam rehabilitation to ditch piping to diversion structure upgrades to integrated water supply management plans and post-fire water quality monitoring. And with these projects, we're opening up new storage opportunities on the West Slope. We're supporting our communities prepare for the realities of post-fire recovery. We're making our water delivery systems more efficient. We're opening up recreation opportunities and enhancing fish habitat across our district. And for the Yampa, the Colorado River District has supported the 2021 Yampa River Flow Pilot Project. It's an important partnership that includes the Colorado Water Trust, the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, Tri-State Generation and Transmission, in addition to irrigators in the Lower Yampa River and Moffat County. And again, you will hear more about this project later in our program. But the project will fund and support releases this summer from Elkhead Reservoir, including data collection and analysis to better understand and quantify the future water supply needs to protect historic water uses in the basin and to support our environmental flows and fish populations. To go over some program basics, the eligibility for our program includes projects across our 15 county region, in addition to a wide range of eligibility for project proponents that I've listed on this slide. We're looking to strategically support both large and small projects that are collaborative with local support. We do require a letter of support from the Board of County Commissioners that's relevant to your project, because it's important to us that we work in conjunction with our elected officials. There is no set matching requirement for our program, but it's important to emphasize that we never intend for the Colorado River District to be the sole source of funding for any project, and we do expect projects to bring their own money to the table. It's our intent to leverage our funds and to make them go farther by identifying other funding partners, whether that's local, private, philanthropic, federal. It's our intention to use these public funds wisely and in a way that multiplies impact. We fund projects across 5 project categories. They're listed here on the screen: productive agriculture, healthy rivers, watershed health and water quality, conservation and efficiency, and infrastructure. And since we only have a few minutes here tonight, I want to let you know that we have project examples for each type in our guidance documents on our website. We also have an entire webinar devoted to this funding program through the Colorado River District's Water with Your Lunch seminar. You can also see that recording on the Colorado River District website. But we're seeking projects, like Alicia mentioned, with multiple benefits. Projects that are most competitive for our funding can demonstrate how the project objectives span multiple categories that I've listed here. We can support multiple phases of a project, whether that's planning, design, or construction, but we are not reimbursing for completed projects. In terms of the application process, we first recommend to applicants a pre-application meeting. We can walk you through our application process and learn more about your individual project needs. We can suggest additional partners to reach out to, recommend ideas to make your project multiple benefit, and ultimately, again, more competitive for our funding. We can also recommend other funding opportunities, other funding partners that you may want to talk to, and provide any guidance that we can to achieve permitting and other project milestones. In terms of application deadlines, we do accept applications on a rolling basis with 2 approval pathways. Requests under $50,000 can typically be approved by our general manager here at the River District, and larger requests over $50,000 must be approved by the Colorado River District Board, which meets quarterly in January, April, July, and October. We typically operate on a 6 to 8 week internal review timeline, where we typically work back and forth with the project proponents to gain additional clarity and ask additional questions. You can find more information again on that internal review process and the criteria that we use, looking at the framework and guidelines for our program that are on the Colorado River District website. But this flexibility with the rolling application process allows us to work with individual project timelines and allows us to align with the timelines of other funding opportunities, again, to leverage our dollars and make them go farther. But to wrap up, what to do next, if you're interested in our funding program, you have a project that you think aligns with the Colorado River District mission, first, review the Community Funding Partnership website and materials. Again, you can access those on our website, coloradoriverdistrict.org. Start there. Second, again, contact us to schedule a pre-application meeting with our staff. You can reach us at partnerfunding@crwcd.org. And finally, you can submit an application and all supporting materials to be considered for funding. But of course, outside of any pre-application meeting, please feel free to contact me. Again, Amy Moyer will list my email in the chat at the end of the program with any questions on the program, if you want to chat about your project and whether it's a good fit, or to reach out to the Colorado River District technical staff to get additional support for your project. And with that, thank you for joining tonight. Thank you for listening. And Alicia, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Amy. I really appreciate that. I really want to reiterate again that at the River District, we are really here to listen to you, your ideas, and help get your projects off the ground. As Amy said, you can reach out to partnerfunding@crwcd.org. It is in the chat for a pre-consultation meeting. There's also a link to the Community Funding Partnership website in your chat, so be sure to check that out. AB will be around later for questions, so just make sure to add your questions to that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Next up, to provide a quick update on the integrated watershed planning is IWMP Chair Doug Monger. Mr. Monger is also a board representative on the River District Board for Drought County, where he's a longtime resident and leader on issues related to water and conservation. It is good to have you here, Director Monger.
Thank you. I thought I was following Becky, but anyhow, so I'm good. So yeah, can you, Eleanor, can you bring up, yeah, there you go. So, you know, I am, yes, I'm on the River District Board. I'm also Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. I'm on the roundtable, and I'm a rancher and former commissioner, and I do about everything I can do to try to get involved in water and make sure we can take care of our water and do what we can do. So we started off with this thing. It was going to be a stream management plan, and then we integrated it. And it didn't really like the wording of that, so it started off with, we ended up with an integrated water management plan. And so, you know, our goal is to try and do what the 1177 roundtable goal is try to get as many people involved into the process and the structure, people that don't know water or just know a facet of water, so that everybody can work together. And we're trying to achieve you know, common goals. And again, I'm not going to read the slides, but we're trying to figure out how we can work together, and we're gathering community concerns and ideas, and you know, working toward goals and objectives that fit everybody's needs. So we started off last summer. We're been doing this about a year, And so we had a whole bunch of kickoff meetings. And we came up with some things that we wanted to start working on. So Eleanor, if you could switch to the next screen. So, you know, again, the primary objective is trying to get people in different facets of life talking together and understanding each other's issues, on each other's concerns, and trying to figure out, you know, what we have in common and how we can put that minimal dollar that we have out there and how we can put it to best use and fit multiple needs. So Eleanor, if you can move to another screen here too. You know, we have a, you know, these aren't just ag community concerns, but they're all of our concerns. We continue to have out of basin demands. You know, we're, and again, Aaron Light's going to be presenting here, but we're entering the new generation. We're entering the current year of 2021, and some things that we haven't been doing as quite as well as maybe we could have, should have, not being under administration. We're starting to see water shortages. As Andy Mueller will tell you, we're into our 21st year of water droughts and the rest. And whether this is the new normal, and we're trying to figure out what we can do with our minimal resources that we have out here and I'll put it back in, and we're trying to work on trying to figure out how we can ag infrastructure, riparian habitat, and then dealing with flows and shortages of flows. And so those are the three things. We have huge amounts of volunteer labor that we have been putting into this thing as well. So Eleanor, if you could, let's hang on, go back a second, I apologize. So when we started into this project, well, you know, the Yampa Basin is huge. And so we couldn't go eat the whole pie at once. So we isolated out and tried to figure out some focus areas, and ones that were probably the most impacted and the most needed of looking at, and the most opportunities that we had for collaboration and working together. So if you see on the map up there on the right, you can kind of see this is the areas that we identified that we were going to work on. We were going to work on the main stem of the Bear River all the way down through Stagecoach. And then we were going to work in the Steamboat Springs area and the Elk River. And then we combined with the lower Yampa down there into Moffat County as well. So that's the area that we were working on. We're not working on tributaries and other things because, again, we couldn't eat the whole apple in one bite. So we're trying to figure out how we can address issues on these things here right as we're doing it. So one of the things that came up was huge again, so next screen, Eleanor. You know, so, you know, we have a deficient agriculture infrastructure. You know, it's all of our ag infrastructure is right at about 100 years old. This place was settled in 1918 and 1898s, and that's where our first water rights were at. So we started building a lot of infrastructure at that time. Well, a lot of that stuff has been depreciated and depleted, and so, you know, we need to get back at, and, you know, and again at the county, you know, our biggest asset holders are the agriculture interests, and the county's been very involved in agriculture, and including, you know, the purchase of development rights program at the county, and keeping ag rights into ag use and the rest, and minimalizing municipal. So the ag infrastructure has been a thing. We actually did a diversion structure assessment on, it's a 400-page document that we did over 40 structures, and did structure assessments on the pluses and minuses and needs on that thing. So that was a big thing that we did there. The second thing is we're working on, this is what came out of over hundreds of hours of volunteer time, is that the second big thing is Riparian Health. And everybody loves the river, and everybody knows what water is to us here. I mean, there's a lot of dry lands that are very good, but water is a crucial thing for us. So we're trying to figure out how we can, and again, these are going to be multi-benefit projects that, that we can address three different things. And the first one is the ag infrastructure. Second one was the riparian health. And the third one, as we all know, is flows and how we can address shortages and how we can make sure people are getting the right amount of water and not too much water. So, I guess, so again, I wasn't going to take all of my time. This is a big project. We started again last summer. It's a $410,000 total project that we had a grant from the state, the WSRF, Water Supply Reserve Fund account to do this project. We have some facilitators that help us, and we have the project management. Total on the bottom of that screen is basically $409,000. And so, if you have any needs or questions, you can get a hold of me. I'm in the phone book. I still answer the phone. And if you're willing to volunteer, and these things, these flows and shortages, riparian health and the ag infrastructure or ag use lands or something that's important to you, we'd like to have you come and join us and be part of these meetings. We have subgroups that meet and have these discussions, as well as having the overall integrated water management committee meetings that we're doing as well. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you for the time, and thank you for inviting me, Eleanor.
Thank you, Director Monger. It's all right. Thank you, Director Monger. We do have Eleanor in the background. I guess it's a good time to say that the River District staff is, they are helping us in all ways for this event, and I want to say thank you to them. We've got Eleanor Hassenbeck in the back, who has helped us with the marketing of this event. We've got Audrey Turner in the background, who is helping to answer your questions and provide chats. So this is a team effort, and we are glad to have everybody here. I appreciate your efforts on the IWMP, Director Monger. Finding common interests and solutions is a big thing. Looking at the flows and infrastructure, we really appreciate the work that you're doing. So now I think that we are going to get an update on water supply and drought in the Yampa River Basin. We'd like to welcome Assistant State Climatologist, Dr. Becky Bollinger. Dr. Bollinger's interests include climate variability, climate trends, climate prediction, the hydrologic cycle, water resources, and climate and drought monitoring. Her expertise and passion is with bridging the gap between climate research and decision-making applications. We are so excited to have you here and look forward to the update that you have to provide today, Dr. Bollinger.
Thank you, Alicia. Thanks for inviting me to speak at this State of the River. I always enjoy doing this. I am going to apologize ahead of time, though, that I am largely going to be the bearer of bad news over the next 15 minutes. So bear with me. I'm going to go over how it started, how it's going, where it's headed in terms of the climate situation, water supply situation in the Yampa Basin. I'm going to go back to 2020, and it really all started in the spring and summer of last year when conditions really started to heat up and dry out. This is looking at the state of Colorado, product from the Westwide Drought Tracker. And the Standardized Precipitation Index is an index that combines precipitation and temperature over a period of time, in this example, 6 months, and shows you how anomalous that is from normal conditions. So because it combines temperature and precipitation, if you're just looking at a precipitation one, the more warm the colors are, the more dry it is. But if you have anomalously warm conditions on top of that, it will further exacerbate that scale. So what we are looking at from the time period of May through October is extremely warm and dry conditions across pretty much the entire west slope, including the majority of the Yampa Basin. And that really set the stage for the cold season. This is a look at November 15th soil moisture saturation from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. Now, the reason that we're looking at soil moisture at this point is because as you're getting closer to the cold season, once you get to a point where those soils are frozen, you're really going to lock in the moisture that's there for the season. And you're going to have to remember that as you start to thaw out at the end of the cold season and in the spring melt-off period like we're in now. So if you focus in on, this is for the entire Colorado River Basin. So on the right side, you can kind of see the Continental Divide outlined there, and all of the peach, red, and maroon colors are a deficit in the soil moisture right there at the Colorado headwaters, at the Yampa headwaters, pretty much all throughout that upper Colorado River Basin. The soils, we're seeing a 8 to 10 inch and sometimes even more deficit of moisture in those soils. Going to head to my super fancy schematic that I created for this to show how important that soil moisture is at the beginning of the cold season. So in the bottom schematic, you have really dry soils. And so in your mountains, you're accumulating that snowpack, and when it starts to melt, more of it is going to go into that soil moisture bucket, and then the remaining is left into runoff and water supply. Whereas the top one, you have more moisture in your soils, which means not as much needs to go into the soils to recharge them. They already have the moisture there, so then you have more available from the snowpack when it's melting to run off and be available for water supply. So this is a look at how the snowpack built up over the Yampa White Basin for this water year. We start the water year at October 1st, and the color shading in the background shows the historic range of what has been observed by those high elevation snowtell sites in the Yampa White Basin. And the green line over that shading shows the median for the time period of 1981 to 2010. And the black line shows what has happened since October 1st, 2020. So we first were starting off and got into December and January, and I've circled that area there that is not too pleasing to the eye, not really how we want to see that snowpack accumulating, much below that median line. So we're not getting the snowpack events that we need to keep up with average, which makes it harder to make up that deficit. Okay, but then we got into February and March, and we had a couple of boosts, and things weren't looking so bad. We were getting a little bit closer to that median. We had a better chance of getting to a normal peak when we were going through this time period. But unfortunately, we peaked early. So where you see that black line reach its highest point and then start moving down towards the right, that was the peak. It was a little bit earlier than the normal peak, which is denoted by that green X area there. Not only was it lower than that, but it was earlier than that. And both are concerning because you don't get the amount of water that you need. And once you melt earlier, it's less efficient for runoff in the system for providing water supply. The only good news I can say from this is that it has been melting more gradually this spring than if it were a quick melt off. Quick melt off would be you're not having the cold temperatures regulate it, you're not adding new snow on it, you're just quickly melting, and that's certainly not what we want to see, especially when you have an early and low peak. So thankfully it has been a little bit delayed thanks to our cooler temperatures and a couple of additional events, but unfortunately still below that average line. So I'm going to briefly step through here. This is a product that's released by NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information. And you can see on the upper left, a temperature rank for each county for the month of January 2021. And then on the bottom right is a precipitation rank for each county for January 2021. And this is out of 127 years. And I really want to just point out the consistent nature that we've been seeing in the northwest corner of our state, not really having a cool or wet signal that we want to see in those winter months. So in January, we were seeing warmer than average across most of the state and drier than average across the Yampa Basin counties. Extending into February, we did have quite the cool event that impacted Colorado east of the Continental Divide, but was just a little bit more closer to normal as you go west of the Continental Divide. And while a few counties did show up slightly wetter than average for the month of February, it really wasn't enough to make up those deficits as you saw in the snowpack graphs. Fast forward to March 2021, which was warmer than average for Routt and Moffat County, also down into Rio Blanco and Garfield counties. And Routt County showed up as drier than average for the March, with a little bit closer to average for the surrounding counties. And then I'll note that that is when we really started seeing the wet pattern that has popped up in the northeastern corner of the state. Which I really wish we could share with the rest of the state, as I was saying to the other panelists earlier. So this is a look at April, and we do have mostly a drier signal west of the Continental Divide, although it does show up, or I'm sorry, that's warmer signal west of the Continental Divide, although it does show up closer to average in the Yampa Basin. I would still say it leans slightly closer to warmer. And unfortunately, in that top 10th percentile of driest Aprils on record for almost the entire west slope for the month of April, not what we want to see. And what we've seen extending out and looking over that entire 12-month period, starting from May of last year and going through April of this year, is that the Yampa Basin is experiencing its driest 12-month period on record for that time period. So this is looking at the standardized precipitation index over time over the Yampa White Basin. And so since it's just standardized precipitation index, it's not taking into account temperature, but with precipitation, every red bar that you see is that 12-month period being anomalously dry. And the more negative it is, the more anomalously dry it is. And you will notice that in the last one, it really takes the crown for being the winner for most anomalously dry. So what this all translates to for water supply is not a very good situation. This is looking at the water supply forecast from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. You can visit their website. I provide the link below, cbrfc.noaa.gov. And when you go to water supply, you get this nice map for the entire Colorado River Basin with different locations around the basin. I've zoomed in here to highlight the Yampa River. So you can see there, the Yampa River, the Colorado River, even extending down into, the Eagle River and Roaring Fork and stuff. And then the White River up there too. But if you focus in on the legend, this tells you the color represents the percent of average water supply forecast for this spring and summer. So the water supply forecast covers the period from April through July, and the total volume of flow across that point in the river or into a reservoir if it's on a reservoir. And really takes into account what the normal supply is to go through that point, and then what we are looking at for this current year. And all of the triangles you will see there are pretty much below that 70% of average. The maroon is 30 to 50% of average. And there's even one that shows up as less than 30% of average. So across the board in our Colorado headwaters region and the Yampa headwaters, all over, we are seeing below average water supply forecasts. I have picked one example to show you. This is the Yampa near Mabel. And this is a complicated graphic to look at, but it has a whole wealth of information. So I'm going to start with the horizontal lines that go all the way across the graphic. And the green solid line and the green dashed line denote what is average, what the total volume will be through that point for April through July at Yampa near Mabel. And so the average and median show up right at about 935,000 acre feet or 800, so right around 900,000 acre feet is what we would typically expect to pass through that point April through July. The record low is the lighter green dashed line that's on the low side, which was in 1977 and was a mere 260,000 acre feet. You can see the max way high up there from 2011. And then the orange dotted line that goes straight across is where we are at currently. So I wouldn't expect, that line to stay there, because we are still having melting occurring and we should still see more flows going through. But we are not going to see average. So the ESP forecast is for 336,000 acre feet, which would just be slightly above the record low. Now that interesting plume shading that you see there is how that forecast evolved over time. So at the very beginning in January 2021, when they put out their first forecast, the little pink squares denote the range of the forecast that they were expecting for April through July. So there's a lot of uncertainty because it's only January and there's still a ways to go. But as you can see, for the most part, they were calling for below average. And that is largely related to that we had a little bit below average snowpack as we went into January, but also those dry soils that I alluded to earlier in the presentation. So we had a dry January, the forecast in February went down a little bit. Because February was cooler and wetter, that forecast bumped up in March. But since March, you can see that that forecast has continually decreased to where we are now. And I would not be surprised if the forecast decreased even a little bit more when we get to the June water supply forecast. And unfortunately, we could even challenge that previous record low value from 1977. Where are we going from here? Quick short-term outlook. This is over the next 7 days. We have these great plots that my boss, the state climatologist, made, and you can find on our drought page. On the upper left is the total amount of precipitation expected to fall over the next 7 days. And then on the right, that's given as a difference from average. So even if you see precipitation on the map, is that enough to be near average? And you can see across almost all of the state, the amount of precipitation we will be getting will be below average for this time of year, with the exception of the San Juan Mountains in Southwest Colorado. Extending out a little further, this is the 8 to 14 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. So this focuses on the end of May and then going into June. The map on the left shows the likelihood for above average or below average temperatures. And the gray over Colorado means that they expect that temperatures will be pretty seasonal or near normal for that time period. And on the right, we're looking at the precipitation outlook. The brownish color shows that there is an increased chance of below average precipitation across much of the western United States, including the Yampa Basin and the rest of the West Slope. And unfortunately, that is something that's expected to continue. This is the May, June, July outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. I apologize that tomorrow they will release an updated map. So this is about as outdated as you get. But we can expect to see in tomorrow's release that we will still have a higher probability of drier than average conditions over us, and a higher probability of warmer than average conditions over us, which means we could have another hot and dry summer to deal with. So going over those key points again, last year, hot and dry summer and fall started the drought and really dried out those soils. We had a poor start to the snowpack accumulation. We couldn't really make up that early deficit. We had an early peak and a low peak, and all of these are combining for that poor water supply outlook you see for all areas of the basin. We do have a dry pattern that's emerging, and the summer is expected to be hot and dry again. So things that I am looking for to hopefully bring us out of this would be some more late summer precipitation that could help recharge the soils, maybe an early start to a cool and snowy fall to help with those soils before we go into the cold season. And we badly need a strong snowpack season next year to really help us recover from this drought. That is all that I have. And if you don't have a time to ask me a question, feel free to email me at any time.
Thank you, Dr. Bollinger. That was definitely some sad information to receive. I do have a couple of questions that were sent to me that I want to take the time to ask. One of them, you mentioned having a hot and dry summer, and one of the things that's been on everybody's mind is fires. So do you have any outlook on what wildfire season may look like this year?
Yeah, so coming at this from a climatologist perspective and not a fire expert, but I can tell you that one of the most concerning areas of the state right now to me is in the southwest corner, where I think their snowpack is likely to be melted out completely before the start of June. And then I would expect the risk for large wildfires to be very high. Because the Yampa Basin is a little further north, that should be delayed as long as there's, still snow melt in those highest elevations. Anywhere there's snowpack or recently melted snowpack, that should minimize the risk. But once that snowpack is gone and and we see how dry the soils are after whatever recharge has happened, I would expect that there would be a higher risk for large wildfires in the area.
Thank you. Another question that I received are, what are some of the key changes in climate trends that you're seeing in the Yampa Basin?
Good question. Across the board, pretty much everywhere you look in the state, I can confidently tell you that we are seeing warmer temperatures. They seem to be most notable in the fall months, especially September. And also in the spring months, we tend to see more warming happening in the spring months. We are not seeing as clear of a pattern in precipitation. Precipitation is a little bit more variable, but I would say that in the northwest part of our state, it doesn't seem to be that we've had as much of a drying trend as what we've seen in the southwest part of the state. And I do think, thankfully, being further north is going to protect a little bit the snowpack that gathers up there. So unfortunately, with a warmer fall and a warmer spring, that's just going to put a little bit more pressure on the snowpack season. But there's still going to be snow, plentiful snow and precipitation from what I see. I do think though that we will have impacts from those warmer temperatures.
Thank you for answering that question. I have one more. Will variability increase with the increase in temperature?
That is also a really good question, and that is something that I should look into. From what I have seen, yes, there can be increased variability just because the climate, when you say the climate is warming, you're shifting the entire distribution with climate change. So that could be shifting the extremes as well. That I do think that we are at risk for more frequent droughts. And I also think that the risk of flooding and high precipitation years is not going away. So I do think that we will continue to see a lot of variability in our state. The question of more variability, I'll have to wait until I do a little bit more research on that.
Well, thank you for that answer. We really do appreciate having you here, or you coming here tonight and providing us this information, as hard as it is to hear. I encourage anybody who has questions, again, you are able to communicate with Dr. Bollinger via email. We will provide that at the end of today's event. If you want to learn more about the work of the Colorado Climate Center, visit climate.colostate.edu. And for climate tweets, follow Dr. Bollinger on Twitter at ClimateBecky. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alicia.
Have a good one.
You too.
So next, to provide an update from the Division of Water Resources, I'd like to welcome Division 6 Engineer Aaron Light. Aaron has been with the Colorado Division of Water Resources for 20 years now, and has been with the Division 6, or has been the Division 6 engineer for nearly 15 years. We welcome you, Becky, or I'm sorry, Aaron, I do apologize. Her news is just on my mind. But we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us about what's going on in the division.
Thank you very much, Alicia. So tonight I am going to cover, and let me wait here as the screen delays. So it's going to take a minute. There we go. Okay, so tonight I want to update you on our measuring device orders that we issued back in September of 2019. Talk to you a little bit about the 2020 abandonment process, as well as talk about the designation of the Yampa as over appropriated. So diving right in, I do have a lot to talk tonight about, and so I'm going to be talking fast, which I'm already a fast talker. So I apologize for that, but I do want to try to cover all of this. So starting with an update on measuring devices, I just want to give you a look. This is a slide that I've presented in other meetings in the past. This is from January of 2020. So we were looking at the count of structures with and without measuring devices, and the query was run in January of 2020. And what I tend to like to look at is the box at the lower right-hand corner, for myself anyway, looking specifically at Division 6. Others here on the phone might prefer to look just at the Yampa River numbers. What you'll see is at that time in January 2020, we were maintaining records on just over 3,200 structures. And at that time, there were just about 1,400 structures with measuring devices, or in the opposite, 55% of the structures without measuring devices. And that was for all of Division 6. So again, we issued orders in September of 2019 in both the Yampa River Basin and North Platte River Basins to install measuring devices. In the Yampa River Basin, we issued about 500 orders, and then in the North Platte River Basin, we issued around 80 orders. Furthermore, in March of 2020, we did send notices to owners in the Green River Basin and White River Basin, informing them that they did need to install operable head gates and measuring devices, and that if they were not going to be able to do that, I would issue an order for them to do so. At this point, we are delaying the issuance of those orders, but at this point, they have been notified to get their measuring devices installed. So fast forwarding here to now, we're going to look at the April numbers, April 2021. And where we sit now is the active structures with record has gone down. You'll see that it's gone down by about 320. We're now just almost 3,000 structures that we are maintaining records on. Part of the reason we've done that is just through this whole process, we've began to become more aware of what we really need, maybe not so much what we really need to keep records on, but really whether there's some structures that don't need to be maintained with records. So that's gone down. And then you can see here that the number of structures that now have measuring devices have gone up. We're just about at 1,600. The numbers do look small. If you look at the two numbers between January 2020 and April of 2021 of structures with measuring devices in all of Division 6, it's gone up by about 120 structures. And now the percent of structures without measuring devices is 46%. So it's a work in progress, and I'm confident we're going to continue to work along with the water users and get more measuring devices installed. Moving on to a 2020 update, 2020 abandonment update. So to talk about the list, the original list that was published in July of 2020 had 703 water rights in whole or in part on that list. And I want to break that list down into really what it was made up of. And what you'll see here is on that list out of 703 were 196 pre-compact alternate points of diversion. And it was just the point of diversion on the list. So it was really a component or the water right in part that was listed on the abandonment list. Similarly, there are 75 post-compact alternate points on that list. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about those pre-compact alternate points and what we're doing with those as we move forward. Then again, breaking that list down, the 703 down even further, we had 289 water rights in whole or in part on the list in the Yampa White Green basins, and 143 rights in the North Platte River Basin. And I show there that that number has been reduced, and I'll explain that further as well. So right now we're right in the middle of the objection phase of the abandonment process, and the deadline to file objections is July 1st of 2021. So here coming up soon. At this point, we have received 107 objections, 39 of which are in the North Platte Basin and 68 of which are in the Yampa White and Green River Basins. To date, we've responded to 37 of those objections. So as far as the pre-compact alternate points, after further discussion with Director Ryan and other folks in the basin, I have elected to remove those alternate points if the individuals that have the water rights so want them removed. They do not need to file an objection. They can simply say they want them removed. Taking note that of that 197 that were on the list, the majority of those are actually owned by 2 water right holders. So right now we are going to end up removing the majority of those pre-compact alternate points. And then the last topic here on this slide is additional review. You saw that the number of water rights in the North Platte River Basin that were listed have gone from around 140 down to 95. The reason for that is I have decided to go back and take a further look at these water rights and try to decide whether or not some water rights can be removed with various criteria that I'm looking at. So I intend to do that also in the Yampa White Green Basin, both, the Yampa White Green Basins. And so some water rights will likely be removed without an objection necessary. So moving on to the designation of the basin as over appropriated. Many of you have heard my presentation likely on this topic, so I'm going to try to move through this quickly. Some of the slides are identical to my last presentation, but some are new, and so hopefully those new slides will keep those interested in the presentation that have already heard my presentation on over appropriation. So to start, let's talk about what over appropriation means. A stream system is considered over-appropriated when at some or all times of the year, the water supply of that stream are insufficient to satisfy all decreed water rights in that system. So the way I like to look at it in a very simple form is it's really all about supply and demand. So what I like to ask is, has the supply gone down over time and has the demand gone up? And specifically looking at demand, we look at new water rights, new well permits, and higher consumptive use are the ones that first came to my mind when I thought about demand. Taking a look first at the supply, what you see here are the flows at Maybell, at the Yampa River at Maybell. I took the gauge station records there. I really like to look at the Yampa River near Maybell gauge station because it has such a long historic period of record, well over 100 years. And you can see here, if you just total the annual volume of water up each year at this gauge, you see that you get the blue dots that you see. It's very scattered and variable as you expect and you see. Each year you see a lot of trend of high flows and low flows and a lot of average type flows. Where so you can see that there with the blue dots, and then the orange dots really looking at the historic average flows throughout that time period, and you can see that the trend is downward, that our flows, historic flows going past the Maybell gauge are going down. So that kind of takes a peek at supply and where our supply is going. Looking more at detail with demand, looking at water rights, we do receive about 70 new water right applications in court each year. This is variable too, when we talk about variability, though we don't often see much less than 70 water court applications. We do often see, it is not uncommon to see more than 70, but 70 is about our average. The majority of these new water court applications are filed in the Yampa River Basin, with the White River Basin a close second. We don't see hardly any applications in the Green and the North Platte. So of those 70 applications, you got to realize there's all kinds of water court applications, from diligence applications to simple changes, change of water rights, so forth and so on. But still, of all those applications filed, the majority of them are for new water rights, whether they be surface water rights or storage water rights. And a lot of times these applications have more than one water right involved in them, so a request for multiple new water rights. Looking at wells. So the important thing to look at wells in the state of Colorado, we assume all groundwater is tributary to the surface water. So when we pump water from a well, it's eventually going to affect the surface water. And this is why it's important when we look at demand to also look at wells. And looking at our wells in the last 10 years, we've had just about 630 new wells constructed, and this is constructed wells, not just permitted. And this is in all of water districts 44, 57, and 58. And the reason I looked at these districts is these are the districts that are being affected by the recommendation I've made to the state engineer to designate the basin over appropriated. Of those 630 wells, or approximately About 80 of those are general purpose wells, and about 550 are residential well permits that have been issued and then the wells constructed. And then, of course, Becky was touching on this a little bit, but as we're obviously seeing a trend in higher temperatures, and as temperatures rise, crop consumptive use also rises. And so that's something to take into consideration when looking at demand. So moving on to what part of the basin is going to be affected by this recommendation of mine is the Yampa River upstream of the Little Snake River. So this map, you can see here, the yellow portion is the portion that would be designated over appropriated, where the pink is already over appropriated and the green is not over appropriated and is not part of this recommendation. And we are looking at all of Division 6. So diving in though into this area a little closer, you can see water districts 44, 57, and 58, where most of 58 is already over appropriated, which is represented by that light green. If Director Ryan does agree that this basin should be designated over appropriated, everything you see in 44, 57, and 58 would become green and be over appropriated. So I want to move a little bit quickly through these next slides, because I think Hunter Akazi, who's up next after me, is going to touch on this. But I do want to really emphasize that designating the basin over appropriated does not affect one's ability to apply for a water right. And I just want to really emphasize that. But what it does affect is well permitting. And so just to touch on this, and I really wanted to put some simple slides together here. On the well permitting, looking at residential wells in an area that is not considered over appropriated, regardless of the lot size, a residential well permit can be issued for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden, and livestock watering. Whereas in basins that are over appropriated for existing lots less than 35 acres, the use of a new well permit is limited to in-house use unless a person is able to get a plan for augmentation that allows for additional uses. Also for residential wells in over appropriated areas, if your lot is greater than 35 acres, it's not affected. You can still come in and get a well permit for up to 3 single-family dwellings, 1 acre lawn and garden, and livestock watering. Moving on to general purpose well permits, which is pretty much any well other than a residential well. In an area that's not over appropriate, a person can come into the state engineer's office and get a well permit without a plan for augmentation. Whereas in a basin that's over appropriated, regardless of the lot size, a plan for augmentation will be required. And again, putting it in extremely simple forms, what does plan for augmentation mean? And I encourage you, if you really want to know more about what a plan for augmentation means, go onto our website. We have great information on what plan for augmentations are. But very simplistically, it is a plan to replace out of priority depletions in time, place, and amount. So we already talked about groundwater being considered tributary to surface water. And what I want to discuss on this slide is why wells are so different when it comes to administration and over appropriation and how they're considered differently. And that really is, you can imagine a situation where we have a senior water right holder that is short of their water right, and they want our office to administer the stream. We can go to junior water right holders on different structures and shut those off. We can shut a head gate. We can pass out of priority inflow into storage structures. We can shut off pumps, and that's an immediate effect to the river. That is not the case with wells, however. Again, wells are depleting our surface water, and I cannot go up and just shut off a well and assume that by shutting off that well, I'm going to get an immediate effect to the river. I won't. Rather, wells have what's called a delayed depletion, and that depletion could be either, I could pump water today, and the effect it could occur to the river tomorrow, a month from now, or even a year from now. And so this is why we have to look at well permits differently when we see a system that's becoming short of water and seeing the system going under administration. So looking here, obviously I went through a long process to prepare a report for the state engineer, making the recommendation to designate the basin over appropriated. And these are just a few things I looked at, but specifically two of these items that I want to touch on, just because my next slides look at them, is whether or not there were critical low flow years without a call. Obviously, we've had calls on the river here in 2018 and 2020. And the other thing I'd like to look at is what would the river have looked like if we had not had reservoir releases introduced into our system. As many of you know, we've had a lot of water released from reservoirs for non-consumptive purposes, specifically from Elka Creek and Stagecoach reservoirs. And so I'd like to look at our river systems as though that non-consumptive reservoir releases were not in the river. And that's what these next slides look at is what would the natural flows been like had we not had the reservoir water in the river. And this is the first slide's looking at the Yampa River near Mayville, and the next one will look at Deer Lodge. So here we see our 4 critical dry years that occurred in the last 20, which are 2002, 12, 18, and 20. And what's important to look at here, we are just looking at, as many of you know, our dry time on the river that's so critical is that late August, early September timeframe. And these this graph truly shows that the Yampa River would have gone to 0 in every single one of these years had we not had this reservoir water in the river. The only year that does not go to 0, as you can see, is 2002. But note that the flows did drop below 10 CFS in 2002 at Mayville for many, many days. And the same trend you'll see here at Deer Lodge, looking at the Deer Lodge gauge, where again, we see many days where the Yampa River dropped to 0 in 2012, 18, and 20. And this is, of course, assuming a certain transit loss from those various reservoirs. And again, 2002, extremely dry year, but didn't quite dip to the 0 level, but was definitely below 10 CFS. So where are we going from here as far as this process of designating the basin over appropriated? Well, as I already indicated, I did write a report and submit that report to Director Ryan on March 17th of 2021. That report did recommend to him that he designate the basin over appropriated. We then published this report and notified the public about the report being available, and we allowed people 30 days to comment on that report in the notice. From here, what we plan to do is we plan to respond to the comments we received. We did receive only 4 sets of comments, a lot of them expressing the same concerns, but Director Ryan and myself will respond to those comments received, as well as we want to continue our public outreach and education. Once Director Ryan feels comfortable that we have done a adequate amount of public outreach and education, and we've responded to these comments, he will make a decision on my recommendation. And if ultimately he decides to decides that the basin is over appropriated and should be considered over appropriated, he will then set a date by which or from which the basin will be considered over appropriated. So Alicia, with that, I'm complete. I'm done with my presentation, and it looks like we'll move on to Hunter now.
Yes, Hunter Causey is a senior water resources engineer in our office. He's been working with the Colorado River District just about 7 years. Welcome, Hunter. Hunter is going to try to make sense of all of this for us and help water users understand a little bit more what over appropriation actually means. Thanks for being with us, Hunter.
Thanks, Alicia, and thanks everyone for logging in for the Yampa Valley State of the River. And thanks, Aaron. That was really interesting. And I'm hoping to follow up on some of what you shared about designation as over appropriated. So I really want to think about the question of what does over appropriation mean for water users, and even more broadly, what does it mean for the community as a whole? So as Aaron mentioned, over appropriation doesn't have an impact to surface water rights. Aaron and her team, they're still going to place calls and administer the river for surface water rights exactly the same, no real impact there. And really the purpose of designating as over appropriated is to protect senior water diverters. So as she mentioned, protecting those senior water rights, senior irrigation rights and others from depletions by junior groundwater rights. So the impact from over-appropriation, Erin mentioned this, is to future wells, so future non-exempt wells. She mentioned some exceptions to this. Another impact is to existing wells with uses that are inconsistent with their permits. So on that latter point, existing wells with unpermitted uses, an example of this could be, let's say a few decades ago, someone went out, they drilled a well, got a permit for it. They were using it for indoor residential use, and then they decided, well, I'd like to have a barn and some horses, so they started stock watering, and then they started using it for irrigation. Well, those uses even currently are illegal, and then after the basin, assuming it's designated as over-appropriated, those uses, if they try to get those in line with their permit, those will have to be augmented. So there's kind of two impacts there. The primary one being future wells, and secondly, those wells that are currently in place, but with uses inconsistent with their permit. So for the wells that are existing with unpermitted uses, I think we have a window of opportunity right now. So between now and the time that Kevin Ryan, assuming that he does designate the basin as over-appropriated, we've got a chance to hopefully straighten out some of those well permits. So if you know of a water right holder, or you have a neighbor or somebody else with a well like this, this is a great time to go to the water commissioner, talk to them about it. There's a process for expanding the use of an existing well so that you can get that straightened out before the basin is designated as over-appropriated. And then going back to those future wells, which will be impacted by this, as Erin mentioned, any future wells will need an augmentation plan. That involves hiring an engineer, hiring an attorney, going through court filings, taking that through court, which can involve opposition. That's all just to say, developing an individual augmentation plan for a single well is a pretty onerous process. And it's a pretty big hurdle for a water user. The other option, and this is already in place in part of the basin, is a blanket augmentation plan. So Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, they have a blanket augmentation plan in the Upper Basin. It's a limited area, but if a water user wants to install a well, they can go to the Upper Yampa, contract for that water, and get an augmentation plan. It's relatively straightforward because Upper Yampa has already gone through the process of taking that decree through court. Outside of that, the problem with that is that only covers a small portion of the Yampa River Basin. So for other users that are outside that area, they don't have that option. And I would say that at this point, the community really has a choice of whether to continue with the status quo, where people have to have their individual augmentation plans, or alternatively, does the community want to come together? This could be the county, it could be through a water conservancy district or some other local organization, and implement some sort of blanket augmentation plan to remove that barrier to water development. So in summary, over-appropriation doesn't have an impact on surface rights. The impact is really to wells, and the community is at a point where they can make a choice to put into place some sort of blanket augmentation plan that really would make a huge impact to people being able to develop water in the basin. So that's all I've got. Alicia, if you want to go to the next person. I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. It happens one time during the event, I guess. I guess we are now going to do a quick conversation with Andy Mueller, the General Manager for the Colorado River District, and Mr. Mickey O'Hara, Director of Programs at the Colorado Water Trust. Mickey has a strong technical background with experience planning and implementing restoration projects, in addition to a great level of enthusiasm and commitment to stream restoration. His previous work experience includes conservation planning and project implementation as AmeriCorps member with the Southwest Conservation Corps in the Nature Conservancy. Welcome, gentlemen. We look forward to hearing a little more about how we can keep water in the river in dry years.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia. I really appreciate all the information tonight. I really want to thank Aaron Light and Becky Bollinger for stepping up and working with the district tonight and providing this information to our constituents. I think there's a lot of really important information out there for folks. I want to first, though, before Mickey and I start a little dialogue, I wanted to give Mickey an opportunity to introduce the Colorado Water Trust and himself. I think they do some really interesting work and unique work in our state. So Mickey, can you tell us a little bit about the Water Trust?
Sure. Thanks, Andy and Alicia. I really appreciate the invitation to join you all tonight and share a little bit about the work that we do and the work we've done in the Yampa River Basin. So first off, if you're not familiar with the Colorado Water Trust, we are a nonprofit organization based out of Denver, Colorado, though we now have staff located in several different corners of the state. We were originally founded in 2001, so we're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, which is exciting. And our mission is to restore flow to Colorado's rivers in need. We are really fortunate in Colorado, and I think water users in Colorado are fortunate that we have a number of robust legal tools to restore flows to rivers in partnership with water users. You know, no two rivers look the same from an environmental need perspective or from a water rights perspective, so it really takes flexible and creative approaches to build successful flow restoration projects. This is really the sweet spot of the Water Trust. We have the experience putting these types of projects together. We have technical and legal expertise working on flow restoration matters in the state. We have completed 32 flow restoration projects to date, all across primarily the western slope, with a couple of projects on the Front Range. And we have many more in development. And I know we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Water Trust's involvement in the Yampa River Basin, but I wanted to give a quick overview of why we're participating in this discussion tonight. So we have spent 10 years working in the Yampa Basin. We've been primarily focused on contracting and releasing water out of Stagecoach Reservoir during times of critical low flows on the upper Yampa River. And so that's the reach downstream of Stagecoach Reservoir, but upstream of Lake Catamount, and then also the reach of river down through the city of Steamboat Springs. It's been an incredibly successful project to date. We've invested nearly $500,000 just in water purchases, plus all of the time and work that goes into putting the project together and implementing it. And none of this would be possible without our partners up there. So I wanted to just quickly thank and acknowledge the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. They've been fantastic to collaborate with over the last 10 years. And thank you to all of the staff and board up there. We've been working together extensively over the last 6 months to get ready for 2021, but also to plan for the future. Also, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, they've been a funding partner as well as a downstream user of that water for in-stream flow use. The city of Steamboat Springs has been a critical partner as a downstream water user. Tri-State Generation and Transmission has been a longtime funding partner as well as a project partner during certain years of implementation up there. And then more recently, the Yampa River Fund has been a funding partner. So I'm leaving out a whole host of folks, but I just wanted to take a second and acknowledge a few people discreetly. So thank you all for the support. And then we only recently got more involved in the lower basin, and I think we'll have a good opportunity to discuss the Water Trust's involvement on the lower Yampa River and some of the partners we've had the opportunity to work with down there. So thank you for allowing me to introduce the Water Trust, Andy, and I can kick it back to you to get this discussion going. And thinking about what happened on the lower Yampa River and the River District and Tri-State's involvement in 2020.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mickey. I really appreciate it. I think one of the things that I think it's so important to bring the Water Trust and others to conversations like this is because it's important to recognize that while the Water Trust is focused on primarily restoring flows and environmental benefits of healthy rivers, the River District is very passionate about that as well, but also part of our mission is to help protect our water users, our consumptive and non-consumptive water users' ability to use that water. And so we have found that in today's world, partnering with everybody who has an interest in the river and can bring creative, collaborative tools to the table is really the way we need to function and the way we get the best results. And I think, 2018, many of you will remember, was the first year that the lower Yampa the main stem faced a call. And it happened. And I said, so 2018, the call came on, it was a rough one. 2020, we saw a repeat of that coming in late August and early September. And it happened, as you will recall, and Dr. Bollinger pointed out, that incredibly dry, hot summer was coming to an end, or we were hoping it was coming to an end. And at that time, a lot of the ranchers who had cattle up on public lands leases were unfortunately in need of bringing their cattle down to their base operations. And as the call came on, many of the junior pumping rights were going to be turned off. And so the River District got together with some of its partners, and I have to say it's a really unique partnership with Tri-State Generation and Transmission. It's a for-profit power company that along with its partners operate the Craig Station plants. They stepped up and volunteered to contribute some flow, some water in the river. Along with the River District, both of us own water in Elkhead Reservoir, and we decided that we were going to put that water in the river with the hope of taking the call off. So not because the call was improperly placed, but because we felt that our duty at the River District certainly is to help our constituents with their water supply issues and try to alleviate the pain. If you'll recall, in the depths of the pandemic, cattle prices were at historic lows. Forcing ranchers to sell off their cattle was a really untenable situation from our perspective. Tri-State, as a good corporate citizen, stepped up and volunteered to add some of their water to that effort. Worked closely also with the Water Trust and Mickey. They were able to put additional water in the river for the fish habitat and the endangered fish recovery program. So basically try to up the flows in the river all around and bring great benefits. It was an effort that really got us thinking at the River District as to, we have to, you've heard me talk about it, I'm sure, and others at the River District. We are facing a new reality. It's not just in the Yampa, it's everywhere within the district. It's hotter and it's drier, and it's likely to continue to trend that way. The question is, what can we do with the tools that we have in place and potentially new tools that we may develop to retime water in the rivers to help the native fish and the habitat, but also to help historic water users. And so we worked on that. And Mickey, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you guys stepped up and who your partners were in that effort in 2020 in the summer and fall.
Sure. Yeah. 2020 was a really interesting year from a hydrologic perspective. We went into the spring with reasonable snowpack numbers, and things did not look dire. And we had the great year of 2019 in the rear view mirror at that point. But in 2020, we obviously didn't receive a lot of precipitation after those spring months on most of the west slope. And so we were watching, river flows deteriorate across the western slope, not just in the Yampa Basin, and ended up engaged in some discussions with the River District and with the Endangered Fish Recovery Program about what we could do to support the needs of the Yampa as flows declined, and as we watched the various entities start to think about what they could do for the river. And so the Water Trust was able actually to directly contract for 250 acre feet of water from the River District supply in Elkhead, and have that water released and administered through the endangered fish critical habitat reach. And in addition to that contract with the River District, we were also able to utilize a CWCB grant that we had received support in-stream flows in the Yampa Basin to really help support the Fish and Wildlife Services additional lease. So separate from the Water Trust's contract, we were able to provide some funding for another lease of water, also from a river district supply in Elkhead. So, my take on how that all happened in 2020 was we had a whole bunch of folks with different goals that were overlapping in a lot of ways, stepping up to try to get some more water in the river. At the end of the day, I think both the river and ecological health of the river and water users really benefited from all of that collaboration and the additional releases. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to optimize what that looks like moving forward, not just talking about Elkhead water, but talking about the basin as a whole. So I'll kick it back to Andy, and I think he can tell you a lot more about what the River District and other partners have been working on to try to get at some of those questions and how all of the various water users and stakeholders can approach this moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. I do think it's important to stress that collaboration. The one thing that we looked at in the basin was really trying to understand who would be impacted by calls. A lot of the rivers that we operate in the River District, the main stem of the Colorado and the Gunnison and their tributaries, they've had calls on the river for 100+ years. And so when the Cameo call comes on or the Shoshone call comes on, we know exactly who's going to be impacted and what the quantity and likely timing of those calls and those impacts will be. In the Yampa, because it's never had a historic or systematic call structure on it, really trying to figure that out was important to us, and then trying to quantify the amount of water that might be needed to keep the call off if that's something that the community wanted to do, while at the same time supporting the Endangered Fish Recovery Program and the recreational community. And so we got together, in our mind, it's really one large effort, but a couple of our partners look at it as a segmented effort. And I understand that. The first part of that is a study that we've commissioned with the River District and Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District and Tri-State got together. And right now we're having some river modelers from Wilson Water Group model the likely impacts of the call, what the shortages are, the locations of those shortages, so that in future hot, dry years, we have a better idea of what's going to happen hydrologically on the river. We think it's really important to generate that data so that the water users and the water policy folks, the county governments involved, and the conservancy districts and our conservation district can help figure out how best to solve this problem. So there's that study's going on with financial contributions, again, from Tri-State, who stepped up, and the Upper Yampa, and then our district. The second part of that is knowing that this year is likely to be dry. Dr. Bollinger, as depressing as she was right on, because although she can deliver depressing news with a smile on her face, which I think is a really high compliment. She pointed out how dry the soil moisture was. We were looking at that. Much of the Yampa Basin had a 12-inch deficit, and if you put a miserable snowpack on top of that, we knew, and we know, as Mickey pointed out, we're headed into a pretty tricky year in 2021. So the River District utilized our new funding through the 7A, which is that ballot question that passed in November. The partnership program, community funding program that Amy talked about earlier, to actually purchase water from our enterprise. Now, our enterprise is owned by the River District, but it is not taxpayer supported. It is a business enterprise separate from our taxpayer funds. And it's what owns the water in Elkhead. It's what maintains our share of Elkhead Reservoir. And so we actually contributed on behalf of our taxpayers, or have allocated up to $50,000 to pay the enterprise to release water with the intent of keeping the call off. And the idea is keeping historic water users in with the ability to continue to pump even during an incredibly dry year. We didn't realize how tough that was going to be. We didn't realize how bad this year was going to be, but we're excited to try to understand this. And again, it's a it's a data collection effort by us. The Upper Yampa is also working closely with us and with Mickey's organization to also get ready to release water. And Mickey's been doing some great work along with his staff to free up additional stored water for the river. And I think, Mickey, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And I'm just fascinated by the kind of the confluences of interest here that you guys were able to bring together to free up some additional water.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. You know, it's an ongoing effort, and we love working in the Yampa Basin because we find that most of the water users up there are collaborative and open to these sorts of discussions. So yeah, in 2021, we received a grant for just over $90,000 from the Yampa River Fund. We also have some additional funding support from private donors and contract work through the CWCB to support this effort. And I'll mention briefly what we've been working on the Upper Yampa River. And again, we'll reference the collaboration of Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District. And I need to give credit also to our staff attorney, Allison Meyer Gould, who's been hard at work working with the district to sort out what a contract for releases in 2021 can look like, but we really have an eye to the future as well. So we've relied on 1-year contract releases to date to get water shepherded down through either the in-stream flow reach on the Yampa River, which again is just there between the confluence of Morrison Creek and Lake Catamount, or down through the city of Steamboat Springs, or all the way down to other downstream water uses. So this year we are focused on making deliveries down to the city of Steamboat Springs wastewater treatment plant. And so the real focus of the release project with Upper Yampa in 2021 is going to be water temperatures in the Yampa River kind of through town. That's what will guide our decision making around releases, but there are numerous incidental benefits when that project is implemented. You have additional water coming out of the dam and coming out of storage and Stagecoach that's generating hydropower, which is sold by the Upper Yampa district. We're increasing flows through the in-stream flow reach, where there's some critical ecological benefits. We are protecting lower water temperatures through the city of Steamboat Springs, reducing stress on fish populations that see a lot of recreational pressure, especially through that town reach. And then downstream of the use by the city of Steamboat Springs in the river, that water is back in the system, available in priority to the next downstream user. So there's a lot of benefits that come out of that project. We're looking right now at releasing between 1,000 and 2,000 acre feet at critical times this year. That number could go up, but that's where we're at today. So that's what I will share. You know, on LCAD, which is also a piece of that Yampa River Fund grant, I think we're largely of the same mindset that we were last year. We're coming in, looking at the conditions, knowing it's going to be a very tough year, coordinating with partners at the River District and at Tri-State and at the Upper Colorado River Endangered Fish Recovery Program, and looking for that opportunity to support releases for the health of the river. And if we can find that opportunity where the stars align and we can support river health while also supporting, as Andy put it, historic consumptive uses in the basin, that's something the Water Trust is always interested in exploring. And you know, we're excited to be part of that conversation and contribute to hopefully answering some of the questions around what the future of water use in the Yampa can look like.
Well, Mickey, you and I could probably keep talking about this all night, but I noticed that we are at our time limit and want to be respectful of people's time. There are still about 80 people on, and I think there's some questions in the chat. I imagine Alicia might want to hit some of those. So Alicia, we'll turn it over to you and feel free to go for it. So thank you.
Thank you. And we are appreciative of everyone who is staying on. We will try and take a couple of questions. If I can get all of our presenters to get back on screen. And also, Eleanor, if you can share that last slide for me. Upper Yampa was not able to be a part of our program this evening, but they did want to let everyone know that the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District, in partnership with the Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, is offering a grant program providing a 50% reimbursement for the installation of head gates and measuring devices with the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District within the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District boundaries. So if you have installed or plan to install a head gate or measuring device, please visit the website or contact Holly Kirkpatrick at the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District for more information on their grant program. And now I will jump over to a couple of questions. Again, thanks to everybody for staying on. Just looking in our question box here. We will start with, a lot of these questions are pointed towards Aaron and possibly Hunter. First question is, it was mentioned earlier that having a well for home use, then in the future adding horses and other livestock is illegal. Is that correct?
Yeah, Aaron, are you still on, or do you want me to take this one?
I am still on, Hunter, and I'm happy to take it, whatever you prefer.
Sure.
Want me to go ahead and dive in? So you are limited to the use of your well for whatever those permitted uses are. If you are using that well for uses that are not permitted, you are required to come in and get a well permit for those uses. So I always am hesitant to say illegal, but you really are not operating your well in accordance with your well permit if you are using that well for purposes that are not permitted. So highly recommended that you go and get your well permit modified so it's consistent with the actual uses.
Thanks, Aaron. One more thing to add there is it's probably advantageous to go ahead and do that now, assuming the state is going to designate the basin as over appropriated, because otherwise, when you come in and change it, if you do that after it's over appropriated, then you're going to have an augmentation plan for those uses.
Thank you. The next question would be for Amy. How is the River District supporting rural water projects?
Yeah, thanks, Alicia. This is a great point to talk about the equity principles that are a core focus of our funding program. And so I did mention in the chat that we do have equity principles across our project categories, but also across our district boundaries. And so it's our intention, again, to fund projects large and small, work across different communities, both our rural water communities and our towns across our district. Again, it's important that we focus on making our communities more resilient. So reach out to us. We're just getting this project started. Again, ballot question 7A passed in November of 2020. So we're early on in our funding program. But again, the intention is to spread out our dollars equitably across the district and across our project categories.
Thank you. Next question, how does over-appropriation impact municipal water use and growth, including potential annexations?
I'll dive in and take a crack at this one. I would say it really doesn't. I mean, it certainly, if your municipal water supply is a well, and you're not in an over-appropriated basin, but even if you have that existing well and an existing well permit, you're not affected. But if you're a municipality and want to come in and get a new well or new well permit in a basin that's become over-appropriated, then certainly you're going to have to come up with an augmentation plan. And I think the best thing to look at is see how our front range municipalities have grown. Those basins have been over appropriated before we even had laws and rules on well permitting, and yet those municipalities have continued to grow. So it really doesn't hamper growth. A municipality can still grow. It just might change how and where their water supplies come from.
Thank you. Anything you want to add there, Hunter?
No, I think that covers it.
The next question, it looks like, Hunter, you might also be typing an answer here. When do you anticipate a call on the river being placed?
I'll throw in one thing and then Aaron, you can hop in. This depends a lot on where you are on the river. So there's tributaries that's one thing. But if you're referring to the Yampa River, the main stem, where calls in 2018 and 2020 were placed, the Lily Park ditch In 2018, the call was placed in late August, and in 2020 it was early September. So that's kind of the time frame if there is a call placed on the river. But you know, there's other variables this year. The River District has a pilot project that we're going to be implementing that may help alleviate some of that issues. So that's a hard question to answer with any certainty. Erin, do you want to jump in?
I think that was a perfect answer, Hunter. You're right. We have systems on call right now. We'll continue to see systems go on call, mostly on the tributaries. We definitely are looking, it's very much looking like we're going to have some calls that we've never had. Just given the conditions, it's looking very possible we'll have a call on the Yampa main stem upstream of Stagecoach. So really maybe a very different year here for us and having calls on tributaries that would normally not happen. But as far as the main stem lower down the river, I think Hunter put it perfectly. It's going to be a little bit different year, which is some different dynamics with this pilot project that the River District is looking at.
Thank you. At this point, we are 10 minutes over, so I don't want to take up any more of our presenters' time. I really appreciate all of you being here. As a reminder to anyone who is interested in our next State of the River events, open for registration now is the Colorado State of the River. It is on May 27th. It will be from 6 till 7:30 p.m. also on Zoom. You can register online. If you are unable to attend, your registration does get you a copy of the recording after the event. We also have the Gunnison State of the River on June 10th, also from 6 until 7:30, and the White State of the River, June 15th, also from 6 to 7:30, all on Zoom. So again, we appreciate you all being here. To everyone in our audience, don't forget, you know, this is your water. These are your rivers, and this is your Colorado River District. We are glad to have you tonight, and we'll see you later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.